"Oh, you're too beautiful, how could you be my wife?" The loner rancher's heart stopped, but her next words changed everything. Elias Croft had not set a second place at his dinner table in 22 years. He had not needed to. The ranch was his, the silence was his, and the long empty evenings were his too. He had made peace with all of it a long time ago, or at least, that was what he told himself every morning when he woke up and every night when he went asleep. The ranch sat on 400 acres of open land in rural Montana, tucked between a ridge of pine trees to the north and a wide, slow river to the south. In the spring, the grass came in thick and green. In the summer, the sky turned a deep, unbroken blue that stretched so far in every direction it made a man feel both very small and very free. In the fall, which was where our story begins, the light turned golden and thin, and the wind came down from the mountains carrying the smell of cold things coming. Elias was 48 years old. He was broad-shouldered and quiet, with hands that had been calloused since his 20s and eyes that were kind when he wasn't paying attention to them. The other ranchers in the county called him the Stone, not because he was mean, but because nothing seemed to move him. He did not go to the bar on Friday nights. He did not come to the town picnic in July. He showed up when he was needed, did what was required, and went home. His only company was a border collie named Biscuit, who had the good sense to ask nothing of Elias except food, a warm spot by the fire, and the occasional scratch behind the ears. Biscuit was a fine companion. He never asked how Elias was doing. He never suggested that Elias should get out more. Elias appreciated this greatly. The phone call from his mother came on a Tuesday. Diane Croft was 70 years old, sharp as a tack, and completely out of patience. She had watched her son disappear into that ranch for 2 decades. She had waited. She had prayed. She had made casseroles and driven them out and left them on his porch and said nothing, because she knew her son and she knew that pushing him was like pushing a wall. The wall did not move, but you hurt your hands. But she was 70 now, and she decided she was done waiting. "I've invited a woman to dinner on Saturday," she told Elias over the phone. "Her name is Nora. She's a teacher. She's a good person. I'd like you to be there." "Mama," Elias said. "Saturday, 6 o'clock, don't be late." She hung up. Elias stood in his kitchen holding the phone and staring at the wall for a long moment. Then he put the phone down, went back outside, and finished mending the fence he had been working on. He told himself he would call her back and cancel. He did not call her back. He did not cancel. He didn't fully understand why. He spent Thursday and Friday telling himself it didn't matter. He spent Saturday afternoon changing his shirt twice, which was 2 more times than he had changed his shirt for any occasion in recent memory. He put on a dark green flannel that his mother had given him for Christmas 2 years ago, and told himself it was just because it was clean. At 5:55, he was standing on his porch. His mother stood beside him, her small hands folded in front of her, wearing the look of a woman who is trying very hard to appear casual and not succeeding. At 6:02, a silver car came slowly down the gravel drive. Elias watched it come. The gravel popped and crunched under the tires. The car stopped near the porch steps, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the door opened. She stepped out into the late October light. She was not what he expected. He didn't know exactly what he had expected, something easier to dismiss maybe, someone trying too hard, but Nora Belling was none of those things. She had dark hair pulled back simply, a few strands loose around her face. She was wearing a plain gray coat and carrying nothing but her car keys. Her face was calm and a little tired in the way of someone who had driven 3 hours and was not entirely sure what she was doing here, but had decided to show up anyway because showing up was what she did. She looked at the ranch, she looked at the porch, she looked at Elias. Elias felt his hand tighten on the porch railing. His mother beside him said absolutely nothing, which was the loudest thing she had ever done. He walked down the steps. He crossed the gravel. He extended his hand and said, Elias Croft, which was perhaps not the most charming introduction in the history of first meetings, but it was what came out. She shook his hand. Her grip was firm and unhesitating. "Nora Belling," she said, "your mother tells me you raise cattle." "Yes, ma'am." "Do you like it?" The question surprised him. People didn't usually ask him that. They asked how many head he had, or how the season had been, or whether he'd had trouble with the drought. They did not ask if he liked it. He looked at her for a moment, not quite sure what to do with the question. "Yeah," he said, "I do." She nodded as if that settled something. "Good," she said. "That matters." Dinner was roast chicken and potatoes, because Diane Croft believed that roast chicken could fix almost anything and potatoes could fix the rest. The table was set with the good dishes, which Elias had not seen in years. There were candles. He looked at the candles and then looked at his mother, who was already moving toward the kitchen with the expression of a woman who had absolutely nothing to explain. For the first 20 minutes, Diane carried the conversation entirely on her own. She was good at it. She asked Nora about the drive, about her school, about the town she lived in. Nora answered easily and warmly and asked questions in return, and the conversation moved the way good conversation does, not because anyone was forcing it, but because the people at the table were genuinely decent and were making an effort. Elias ate his chicken and said very little. He was watching her, though. He couldn't seem to stop. There was something about the way she listened fully, without waiting for her turn to speak, that he found himself drawn to in a way he couldn't name. She laughed once at something his mother said, a real laugh, not a polite one, and something shifted in his chest without his permission. He told himself to stop it. Then his mother said, "Oh, I think I left something in the oven," and disappeared into the kitchen. The sound of the kitchen door swinging shut behind her was very loud in the sudden quiet. Elias looked at his plate. Nora looked at hers. Outside, the wind moved through the pines. He cleared his throat. "You don't have to stay if this isn't what you were looking for," he said. The words came out more gruffly than he intended, but he pressed on. "My mother means well. She always has. But I know I'm probably not." He stopped. He wasn't sure how to finish the sentence without it sounding worse than it already did. Nora set down her fork. She did it slowly and deliberately, the way a person does when they want to make sure what comes next is heard clearly. She looked at him, not through him, not past him, at him, directly. The way very few people had ever looked at Elias Croft. "My husband used to say things like that," she said. Her voice was quiet and even. "He used to say I was too good for him, that I deserved better. He spent a lot of our marriage apologizing for being in it." She paused. "I used to tell him, I'm not here to judge you. I'm not keeping score. I came because I wanted to be here." The candle between them flickered. Outside, biscuits shifted on the porch. "I'm not here to judge you either, Elias," she said. The silence that followed was not an uncomfortable one. It was the kind of silence that comes after something true has been said, when both people need a moment to let it settle. Elias looked at her for a long time. He was not a man who cried, hadn't in years, but something behind his eyes felt different. Looser, somehow. Like a knot that had been pulled too tight for too long and had finally, without warning, begun to give. "How long were you married?" he asked. His voice was lower now. 11 years, she said. "He passed 7 years ago, illness." "I'm sorry." "Thank you," she picked up her fork again. "I have a son, he's 17. His name is Cal." "Is he a good kid?" She smiled then, and it changed her whole face. "He's an excellent kid who thinks he knows everything. So yes, he's 17. Elias almost smiled. He wasn't sure he managed it fully, but something moved in his face that hadn't moved in a long time. His mother returned from the kitchen approximately 45 minutes after she had left it, carrying a pie that she had definitely not spent 45 minutes making. She set it on the table and looked at the two of them with an expression. She tried very hard to keep neutral. She failed, but nobody mentioned it. They stayed at the table until almost 10 o'clock. The conversation loosened as the evening went on. Nora asked about the ranch, not politely, but with actual interest, and Elias found himself talking about things he hadn't talked about in years. The way the river flooded in spring. The winter he'd lost 6 cattle to a storm and had to rebuild the north barn from scratch. The way Biscuit, as a puppy, had herded the chickens into the garden and sat looking very pleased with himself while everything went wrong. Nora told him about her classroom, about the boy who had memorized every capital city in the world and corrected her, loudly, in front of the class, about the girl who had been afraid to read aloud until one day she just wasn't anymore, and how Nora still thought about that sometimes when she needed reminding that things can change. Elias listened. He was good at listening when he allowed himself to do it. When Nora said goodnight, she thanked Diane for dinner. She put on her coat and walked to her car, and Elias walked her out because it was the right thing to do. At the car, she turned and looked at him one more time. "It was nice to meet you, Elias," she said. "Simple, no performance." "It was nice to meet you too," he said. She got in the car. He watched the taillights disappear down the gravel drive until there was nothing left but the dark and the sound of the pines and Biscuit nudging his hand with a cold nose. He stood there for a while. The next morning he found a note on the kitchen table. It was on a small piece of paper, handwritten in neat, even letters. She had thanked Diane for the meal. She had written her phone number at the bottom. That was all. No flourishes, no pressure, just a door left open. He read it twice. He folded it carefully and put it in the front pocket of his shirt. He went out to feed the cattle. He came back in and drank his coffee. He looked at the single coffee mug in the drying rack, the way he looked at it every morning, and this time something about it felt different. Not painful, just noticeable. He did not call that day or the next day. On Wednesday morning, he was out at the fence line again. The sky was high and blue, cleared out after a week of gray clouds. Biscuit sat a few feet away, watching the pasture with the alert calm of a dog who took his job seriously. Elias pulled the note from his pocket. The fold had softened from being carried close to his chest for 3 days. He read it one more time, though he already knew what it said. He went inside and picked up the phone. It rang twice. She answered. "This is Elias Croft," he said, because apparently that was how he introduced himself now. "I was wondering if you'd like to come back sometime." There was a pause, not a long one. "I was wondering when you'd ask," she said. He let out a long, slow breath. Through the kitchen window he could see the pasture, the ridge of pines, the wide open sky above it all. He had looked at that view 1,000 times and thought nothing of it. This morning it looked a little different. 6 months passed. Nora came back, and then she came back again. Her son Cal came out twice on weekends and approached Elias with the careful, measuring look of a young man who loves his mother and is taking his time deciding things. Elias did not try too hard. He showed Cal the barn. He let him drive the old truck down the field road. He answered his questions honestly and did not try to be anything he wasn't. By the second visit, Cal had started asking questions about the cattle. By the third, he was helping without being asked. That was enough. That was more than enough. On a Saturday afternoon in late October, exactly 1 year after Nora's car had first come down the gravel drive, she was sitting on the porch in the chair that had somehow become her chair, reading a book. The light was the same golden thin light as the year before. The wind was the same. Elias came out of the barn and washed his hands at the outdoor spigot. The cold water ran over his calloused knuckles. He dried them on his jeans and walked to the porch and sat down in the chair beside her. Neither of them said anything for a while. Biscuit was asleep at their feet, one ear twitching at something in a dream. After a few minutes, Elias said, "I think I was wrong about myself." Nora did not look up from her book, but the corner of her mouth turned up in a small, certain smile. "I know," she said. "I could tell." The sky above the ranch was wide and blue and going slowly orange at the edges. The pines stood dark and still to the north. The river moved quietly somewhere to the south, the way it always had, not caring much about any of it. But the porch was no longer empty. And Elias Croft, for the first time in 22 years, did not feel like a man who had settled for a small life. He felt like a man whose life had quietly, without fanfare, without warning, become exactly the right size.